Hello! Welcome! Hello. Everybody's wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, right? Great. Not hungover at all. No one's hungover. Everyone's ready. Welcome to the talk. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very excited to be here. And there's lots of light touches in how I've described this talk and how I've named it. But it is touching on Elastic Stack, it's touching on FIM, it's touching on HIDS. But it's all about seeing data and what people do with it. But I want to take you through more of a story of FIM and HIDS and getting to where you have data going somewhere, what you're doing with it, and where you can kind of go with that, the general idea set behind that. And I'm quite excited about it, so let's start with me. Let's start with me first. I'm Brett. I'm a security analyst, engineer now. Apparently I manage people. People have told me. People also call me the chief executive brewmaker. So I'm obviously an executive, of course. And I've been doing InfoSec for just under 4 years now. It's 4 years in February, something around that. But I'm enjoying myself. I'm quite excited. And the reason I've been doing this talk is it's nearly where I started. FIM, HIDS, and lots of endpoint monitoring. That's pretty much where it began. Beyond some of the GRC and compliance stuff I did years ago. But it's what I first started enjoying in terms of technical stuff. So I thought, why not go back to my roots and talk about that for 45 minutes? So I'm going to start from the beginning of my story, and that's going to be about FIM and what FIM is. And FIM is file integrity monitoring. It's about looking after what's important to you on a very selective basis. It's a very reactive security control. It's not it's not preventative in any way. It's all about an internal kind of events in depth solution. It's completely stateful. It's not particularly real time. People can sell it as real time, but it's a technical impossibility to really be real time. But it's also really adaptable because it's in that defense in depth solution. You're able to put it anywhere effectively and monitor any specific thing you want. And how does this work, I suppose, is the first question. And it's mostly to do with the specific file attributes. So that's hashes, that's the content of configuration files, that's any kind of changes like the capabilities on a file, like the security and rights on a file, and monitoring those different changes. There's also ways for it to monitor APIs and things like that on AWS or Azure, but that's a bit more advanced, and we'll really talk about that a bit later. But I've told you a little bit why FIM, I suppose why I've chosen FIM as the starting point for me. It's like, why do people actually use FIM? And it's all about compliance more than anything. It's particularly when you're like a SME kind of size, not like a full enterprise, you're needing to comply with BSIDES, or an American company that needs to comply with SOX, HIPAA, NERC-CIT, a few other shortened acronyms. But that's always going to be at the core of why people use it. But it's kind of it's like a typical HIDS solution for any kind of SME, as far as I've experienced anyway. And it gives them those eyes, and the kind of movers and shakers on their infrastructure based on their baseline or the baseline they're generating from this information and this data. And it does offer that near real time that I mentioned before, but of course, technical impossibility, but it gives them that initial visibility. And that's why it's an important kind of fundamental first step towards having security controls and actually investigating it a bit further. There are, of course, ways around it. As I was saying, it's a bit of a foundational control. There are ways of dealing with that non-real-time functions, as they deal with ways of dealing with that dynamic functions, but it's mostly around more advanced controls or other controls, or in terms of process and policies more than anything. So the goal I'm trying to aim for with FIM right now is all about that kind of the FIM and HIDS solution combined with somewhere to actually aggregate and analyze your data. And that's why I've gone for the power couple of Wazuh and ELK. They're pretty much built for each other. And I'm really quite excited to talk about each part. It's really cool. It's really cool, promise. Nobody's hungover. I'm very excited about everything. So let's talk about that FIM solution. Let's talk about that HIDS solution. But that Wazuh HIDS solution obviously had to come from somewhere, and that's evolved from a open source solution called OSEC, which is open source HIDS security. Rolls off the tongue. That provides your FIM, your HIDS, your registry monitoring, your system level monitoring, and it provides like a rudimentary rootkit detection based on file names and hashes. Nothing too crazy. It's quite a small file actually that does the signatures. It's definitely not an antivirus replacement at all. But it provides those regulatory needs, like I was saying before, the compliance ones, as well as your starter HIDS, your starter FIM, your fundamentals are all there in this piece of kit. But why do a lot of people typically use OSEC? It's because a lot of people already use OSEC. It's open source. So people are typically looking at open source and going, oh, it's free, and not really giving back to it. Well, that's a completely different argument. But it is fundamentally really, really easy to use. It's really easy to set up. But the documentation isn't the best. It's a bit confusing when you first look at it. It takes about half an hour to understand the installation process initially. But after that, the documentation's fine. It's got a bit of everything, but it's not perfect. It's not where it might need to be. So what has that changed into? And it's that Wazuh that I've mentioned before. That's a fork of OSEC. That's the next evolution, as I've put up there. But it's taken that base open source software and built on top of it and added extra features. Things like OpenSCAP, things like the tie-ins with ELK and that data aggregation point and analysis point. But it's a combination of all those features into a bigger, wider platform. And while it does provide those features of OSEC, those FIM, those HIDS, that system monitoring, it also provides the features of OpenSCAP and ELK. So OpenSCAP is obviously providing the vulnerability management and discovery, as well as the more compliance-focused, compliance-aimed configuration management and analysis and discovery. But by providing that next level of features and the actual ease of use that's coming naturally from OSEC, you're creating a really immediately almost powerful tool for people to start working with, to start using, to start changing, to start configuring to their environment. And again, you can go back to that baseline and you're able to baseline further and further and understand more and more your environment, particularly when you're an SME versus an enterprise. And it makes it so much easier, more than anything. Or else, as you're an SME and you're growing bigger and larger, if you're not able to do this kind of constant discovery, you're going to end up a bit blind to it all. There's just going to be loads of unlooked after infrastructure and information lying about, but you won't have time or manpower or investment really to look into. And that's where you become a bit stuck more than anything. You've got lots of sticky stuff you can't get off your hands. You're blind to what you actually really need to do. And this is providing that first step, that initial investigation point for your infrastructure by providing that monitoring. So how does it do it? It's a basic kind of agent-server communication, 3 different processes: syscheck, rootkitd. Forgive me for getting the other process daemon, but it basically exists as install the agent on the server, calls back to manager. That's where your manager, so your config goes, is where you switch it off and on from. Just have to import the key on the agent, obviously. But now that you've actually got that set up, that initial part, you actually need somewhere to put all this logs, all these alerting, all this telemetry data that you're gathering. And it's there in the middle, the one at the top as well. That's ELK. That's the part, it ties really, really tightly in with ELK. This diagram itself is just giving you 2 different options on either single node for masters or distributed nodes. That's its own thing. That's just giving you choices in design. That's giving you choice in how you want to set it up more than anything. But the fact that it's outright saying it's being able to tie in with this data aggregation platform and analysis platform is immediately really, really useful and really, really interesting, because it gets you further and further and more mature towards where you may want or need to be by providing the place. There's a few different ways I suppose you can look at the architecture. If you want to talk about it, you can talk about it for hours, maybe over a few tequilas, a few other drinks, but it's up to you. You can, if you've got Elastic already, you can just tie it in with that. If you've not, stick it on the single server, look after that, set up a new Elastic instance, start getting web data or whatever, start aggregating into that point. There's a load of different choices you've got there. But let's take a deeper dive into what ELK is. And it's a combination of 3 main projects of Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana, ELK. And that's about a search and analysis engine, which is Elasticsearch. You've got Logstash, which is a server-side pipeline project for digesting that data, sending it, receiving it, all the good stuff. And then you've got Kibana, which is all about visualization, actually interacting with it on a GUI web interface level. And that combination is an immediate start to that whole data aggregation platform. It makes it pretty cool, pretty interesting. And how it does this is by taking that Logstash, so the pipeline, the server-side pipeline aggregation point, takes it in, does whatever you need it to do in that pipeline, takes it into Elasticsearch, and then you can interact with it from Kibana. And it's that. It's beautiful. It's really easy. But you may have noticed there's another one there. They do a project called Beats as well. That's an agent-based kind of setup. So if you can't send the logs necessarily, but you still want to receive them or gather them, you can put a agent on the endpoint, pulls them off, or sends them wherever. Got all the options there. So it's like, you can get really specific with beats as well. You can get metric beats for metrics, get audit beats for audit logs, or you can get generic like file beat or any kind of file log, anything you want. They're all available to aggregate that data but that would be going straight to Elasticsearch rather than via a pipeline typically. You can still send it via Logstash, but it's neither here nor there. That's your choice. The pipelines on Logstash are really, really, I don't want to say complex, I don't want to say lengthy. They're available to configure. You've got lots of different choices in how you want to take that data. It uses a language called Grok to be able to take the data in, edit it, change it, label it however you want it to be labeled. And it puts into Elasticsearch, and then you've got it there, your index of many indexes. And you've got data is available, it's identifiable, you know what it is, you know where it is, you know when it is. But why ELK? Why do people choose ELK? Why have I chosen ELK? I've chosen ELK for obvious reasons. So it ties into Wazuh, obviously, but it is overall just a powerful platform. It's a powerful search engine. It's got lots of choices in terms of architecture design, in terms of how you want to set it up and distribute it. And you can make lots of different choices in however you want to set it up. You can centralize it or decentralize it. There's options for how you want to look at identity or user behavior. There's options for how you want to store that data. Do you want to get rid of it after 6 months? All the options are there. All the typical kind of options. But there's also so many ways of analysing that data as well, especially when you've got it in. You've got Kibana there. You can talk about statistical analysis. You can talk about straight up just looking through the data. You can talk about machine learning. You can talk about what's the name they use? It's Timeline is the name of the platform. It's analysing data over a longer time period. Don't remember the actual name for it, unfortunately. But there's so many ways of using all this data. You can learn from it, you can monitor it however you like as well. It's completely your choice. But again, it's Wazuh and ELK. They are those two pieces stuck together. It's got Wazuh on those endpoints on the manager, or separately, or with ELK, like I was showing you the architectural choices. And you've actually reached that goal, that combination of the two. You've got a platform for security analytics, or starting to, depending on your view. You can actually start moving forward with what you've got. And you've got the whole kind of 3 main points you can do with your data. So you can enrich it, analyze it, and aggregate it. You can bop it. So when I say an aggregator, you've got your data in that place. You've got your data in that centralized or decentralized architecture. It's available to you now. You can combine it with all the other data, like I was saying. You can change it and edit it. You can label it how you need it to. It's all your own choices. I apologize if this isn't too technical of a deep dive, but I'm touching on a lot of points here. And what it makes available to people is if you don't want to learn SQL, or you don't want to do like a full scene kind of setup, but you still want to start somewhere, you still want to try something out, this is what this is. And what I'm telling you is you can move from this to a more powerful platform, which is something I'll be talking about soon. I'm quite excited about that. But you can, from that aggregation, from putting your data in this platform, this analytics platform, you can actually enrich it using those pipelines I was mentioning before. You're able to pull out IPs, you're able to push and pull data together, you're able to thoroughly import threat intelligence and things like that right into your data. And it really lets you take a lot of work from your analysts. My assumption at this point is that if you're getting this far, you've at least hired a person that's looking at it. But that's not always the case. It definitely isn't always the case. But there's plenty of options for taking a lot of the work off them, a lot of the enrichment. So when I'm saying about identifying and assigning all that data with labels and being able to look at it easier, that's where the pipeline comes in. That's that initial part, that's that initial touch point. And not only does it, you can do it manually, you can do it in a YAML file. That's how you live your life. Or you can do it in a visualization. They offer this now and it's fantastic and it makes things very, very easy. And I'd thoroughly recommend good weekend, sit in, get a brew, hop on the Kibana dashboard and throw together a few pipelines. It's a bit of fun, right? From there, saying a lot, you can analyze it. It's a fantastic platform. You've got lots of different options. You've got lots of different options in machine learning and statistical analysis, like I was saying before. But it's also got lots of built-in features, like monitoring, like APM, like the choices you can make in the data you want, the data you don't want. You can drop it, you can archive it. It's a great platform for PCI because it gives you the point to aggregate all that data, but it also lets you make the choices of, great, I've got the PCI data, let's put that aside, still compliant, don't worry about it. I actually want to use it for something versus just compliance. And the feature set of it allows it to be very controlled if you need it to be. It allows you to do things like SAML single sign-on. It allows you to do things like RBAC, ABAC. It also allows you to, because of that distributed nature I was talking about before, it allows you to easily orchestrate it and just throw another node, throw another node, throw another node, wherever you need it to be. It doesn't take long at all. It's really, really straightforward. But from this platform, we've then got somewhere to go now. We've got something really, really cool and interesting I am a big fan of, called Apache Metron. Now, this is a much, much larger platform. This part of it is ELK, which is why I've got here. But it's Kafka, it's Hadoop, it's a lot of advanced stuff suddenly in your face. But this is more aimed towards like a full enterprise, people dedicated to this work. This is where this is. It takes a while to set up, it takes a while to understand, it takes a while to get running. But of course, it's a much larger platform. But it builds on top of that platform that's been built with Wazuh and ELK and gives you a much larger choice of how you want to aggregate it, how you want to enrich it. There's lots of more built-in enrichments as well, things like threat intelligence, things like how metrics can aggregate. And once you've got that initial setup out of the way, it's all there and available and in front of you. It's easily manageable. I say easily. It's easy for me. It might be hard for you. Subjective, right? But it's that next level. You've gone from bop it to bop it extreme. You've got 4 handles instead of 2. It's fancy. That's what it is. But it's a massive framework in comparison to Wazuh and ELK and that platform. It's evolved from Cisco OpenSock, and it's become this platform when it was taken on by Hortonworks, I want to say. I wouldn't 100% quote me on that, but I believe it is. And they have took it to a completely new level, completely new idea set, a new framework. But they've really built on some incredible stuff. And it provides 4 key ideas. It's all about enrichment. It's all about... It's all about enrichment. It's all about getting your logs in there. It's all about getting your network stuff in there. It's all about threat intelligence. Those 4 main ideas are what drives this framework. But it naturally takes in things like PCAPs, things like logs, things like sticks and taxi. It's all available there in front of you, right there, and immediately available, and it's so interesting. I'd recommend giving it a go if you get the chance. It's a fantastic framework. But what it's done is it's taken that core ELK, it's taken that core aggregation platform and gone, okay, so how do we make this bit easier, and this bit easier, and this bit easier? Being very careful not to over-engineer it, obviously. But you're taking all these functional parts, putting them together into this beautiful burger, these layers of really good stuff. It's like you're taking it from like a normal beef burger to like a triple-decker stacker. Delicious. Lots of hash browns, lots of cheese, few onion rings on top. Oh, beautiful. Especially when you're hungover. But you're taking it to that new level, is what I'm saying. Because you've got so many people behind and working on it. Got lots of people working on ELK, don't get me wrong, but this is dedicated framework security analytics. There's lots of different use cases and ideas driving it that aren't necessarily driving Elastic. So it's important to kind of weigh up where you want to be, how much time you want to invest in that, and decide what you need there. But the fact that it's this dedicated security analytics framework means it's much more extensible. It's built for that idea set. It's built for forensic analysts. It's built for SOC analysts. It's built for people doing the work rather than somebody who needs an understanding of data analysis and how to actually configure that. And it takes a lot of the work, or guesswork, out of the work for the analysts. And it's really, really fantastic. But how does it work? It's pretty similar to ELK. It's got the key kind of points of the data ingestion. So it's giving you examples of NIFI and generic telemetry, but of course you can have things like the file piece, things like the audit metric piece, things like the log stash still there and available to you. But when it's aggregating it, it's pulling in every single thing it can and putting that into one place, or distributed, and I set it up, right? But then when it's going from there, it's going into an enrichment. Enrichment isn't optional, like Elastic. It's going to be able to aggregate it with all these kind of threat intelligence sources, sticks, taxi, user input, understanding that data is what's driving that. Enrichment is your analysts, your threat intelligence people. All this work is actually going into it versus it just being a data source, a data lake. And then from there, you can take, similar to Elastic, you can take the alerting and the monitoring. But obviously, they've got a bit more mature in terms of how you might alert or monitor, as in it's naturally built for it, right? You can stick it in Jira, you can stick it in emails, text you if you want, up to you. But the platform needs
your input more than anything, your understanding, your work going into it. So it's important to understand your data. It's important to map your infrastructure. It's important to baseline understand it. I know these can be really, really difficult. You've typically got a massive workload, but it's about trying. It's about finding out. It's about knowing what you do and don't understand and making those risk decisions and how you want to approach these things. A lot of SMEs I've seen don't have a security strategy, so they'll have that. We need to comply. How do we get there? And Wazuh ELK is a perfect starting place for BSIDES. It's easy, it's straightforward, it's simple, and it gives you compliance. And then you just lock it up and put it away. So it's still doing its thing, still going, still compliant. Nobody's actually, you do need to actually analyse and look at the data, but there's no definition of how regularly beyond daily. But it's about understanding what you're buying and selling. It's about what your services as a business, what do you get in terms of data, but also what do you give in terms of data, and knowing that, so you can also use it for and against yourself, I suppose, in terms of securing your infrastructure and understanding it. But it's important that you use it when it's available to you, and you've got these platforms available to you. It's once you've got past that understanding stage, once you've got past that baseline stage, you've then got something to work with. You've got something available to you, and you're able to do something with it. It's important that you do, because it's available, it's ready for you, not anyone else. No one else is particularly interested in the syslog output of a random LDAP server, except you or anybody who's trying to break in your infrastructure. So it's probably best that you use it first before they do. But it's knowing what you're after, how to get there, and how you're going to do it. And this is just one of the choices of analysis and analytics and aggregation. I'm more than happy to field technical questions, but it's up to you to field your own risk questions to understand what you've got, what you need, and what you're going to do with it all. But thank you. That's it. I'm happy with that.